Hello everybody, welcome to a tutorial of framer.js. We'll start with this presentation. So the agenda for today would be to first introduce the backstory of Framer, why we should prototype. The second phase is that we'll be building some very cool stuff together. And the third phase is a wrap-up of what you've learned and where to take this project of doing Framer next. So let's get started. The backstory of Framer is these two Dutch guys who had their own design studio called Sofa joined Facebook as product designers, and they realized there's a real lack of good prototyping tools for designing animations and interactions that involve motion and movement, and they figured they could use front-end technologies such as JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to create such a prototyping tool. And that's how Framer was born. And from a front-end library, they turned this into a real prototyping tool that is used by many large companies, technology companies today. So why should we prototype? Well, quite simply, it's because our products look like this today. They're moving. They're no longer static. They have all sorts of in-between states. And we should really be designing these states rather than making static views and mocks, because much of the design lies in the actual movements. So the way I like to think about it is to actually view ourselves as not only as great painters, we should absolutely try to be great painters, but we should also aim to be great directors. We're thinking about the whole story, the movements, the way people's emotions are impacted through our design, and we should consider the whole package. And one of the great ways of doing that is to use prototyping tools. So why Framer? Well, quite simply because Framer is strong in many aspects. First, it's the most versatile prototyping tool I've personally used and seen. Compared to something like InVision, it's much more robust, and compared to something like Principle, it's much more versatile. And compared to something like Origami or Quartz Composer, Framer is actually leveraging the existing front-end technologies. So once you've learned how to use Framer, you can write CoffeeScript, you can write JavaScript that can be applied in all sorts of web apps and different applications. So the uses are just quite versatile, and not to mention that you can hook up Framer prototypes with the real data. So even if you want to play with real data, you can do that with connecting with the APIs. You can even build Framer into your existing prototyping workflow. Let's say you use After Effects a lot. Framer allows you to work with videos that you export into the prototypes very easily. So I really enjoy the versatility of Framer. The second aspect is that Framer is very stable. It is the most stable prototyping application I've personally used and seen. And because it's wrapped together in a very nice tool called Framer Studio, a lot of the pain points such as previewing and managing your prototypes in the cloud are taken care of for you. So the guys at Framer have done a very good job of building a package around this front-end library so that you can just get down to work. And compared to some of the other prototyping tools, the Framer prototypes are probably the most stable ones I've seen. You can even write spaghetti code, and most of the times the prototypes simply just work. And that's what we need in a production workflow. To production in terms of producing product design prototypes and testing them in front of users. What we need is that we need the prototype to be good enough that users get over the hump of thinking that this is not a real thing. Right? We want them to think like this is a real thing so we can get feedback. So Framer is really good for that. So all that being said, I think there are three things that Framer are doing very well. First, Framer allows you to prototyping in general allows you to do three things. One, it allows you to explore ideas. So Framer is especially good with that because it allows you to quickly change the values and the variables in your prototype, so you can see different effects, different timings, so you can explore those interactions very quickly. Second, it allows you to define very precisely what you want. So you know exactly what kind of spin curve you want to use, what kind of timing you want, what's the distance between two elements, and lastly, you can easily communicate that with fellow designers, engineers, and PMs because everything is so precisely defined. So you can easily share that and people understand what exactly you did to get the effect you want. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what Framer is. To me, their value prop on their website really speaks some truth, which is bring your designs to life. For me, that definitely is something that I see every day. Now, there are 4 sort of overarching elements to Framer. There are layers, animations, states, and events. Layers are the building blocks of your prototype. The concepts are similar to layers in Sketch and Illustrator. For those of you who has done some front-end work, this is similar to HTML divs and spans and paragraph tags. Animations are the things that you can apply to layers that causes these layers to move and change and animate. So this is similar to the idea of applying animations in After Effects or CSS. The third thing is states. So the way I like to understand it is that these things are similar to how IDs and classes work inside HTML and CSS. It basically allows you to give a tag for a group of interactions or movements. This is commonly used in association with the animations so that you can quickly define certain states where animations can change back and forth between the states. And lastly, events are things you use to communicate with the elements so that they can change upon something happening. So these things could be taps, clicks, drags, and scrolls. These are similar to JavaScript event listeners that you can set in your website. So basically, it's essentially the same thing. Instead of listening to clicks and desktop events, they're listening to interactive events that's built inside Framer. So let's dive in. Download these files, and we shall get started after that.
Let's open up this file called colorpalette.sketch. This is just a file I found online. It has 4 groups that I've adapted into 4 groups. So color 1, 2, 3, 4 under the color palette artboard. There's also a dark background in it. It's not inside the group. So you'll notice that when you import this later into Framer, dark background will be imported, but it will not show up in the layers panel. So you will see it inside the prototype you will be creating, but you won't be able to manipulate the background layer because it's not in a group. So color 1, 2, 3, 4 are, and those are the things we can change because they're in a group. That's just how Framer works. So once we expand it, we'll just see there's 4 elements. It's a regular sketch file, nothing special. And let's go inside Framer and actually import it. The way importing works is actually very simple. There are 3 ways to do it. One is to click the button, one is to use a short keyboard shortcut, and another is to drag and drop. So let's click for today. And when you click it, there's a modal that shows up. Sketch is one of the files. You'll see color palette.sketch. Make sure you choose the right number. So 2x is what you want. So before you click import, choose 2x, and yeah, The reason you do that is because the actual size matters. So since we usually design 1x, if we want to preview on a device like the iPhone, we'll have to choose 2x. So if you hit 1x by accident, close that file and redo it, because we want to demo this for 2x. So you'll notice that this file, this layer is actually built in 1x, and the way to check it is to go to device. Let's say we want a smartphone, the iPhone will do. Click on that. You'll see that the screen now captures the sketch you created. The way it works is that it will just simply put the layers in its original position relative to 0. So if you have 0 in your sketch file, it's going to be 0, so the top left corner in the sketch, in the framework prototype. You'll see that over here on the left is where Sketch automatically creates a, Framer automatically creates a command for you. The way we can read this is Sketch is a object we created, a layer we created, and it's imported. So there's a comment above, so you always use a hashtag to write a comment. So in this case, it's importing the color palette file, and the size and position are scale of 1 to 2. That's just a comment automatically generated by the system. Sketch equals to framer.importer.load is a function that's built in, and imported / color palette at 2x, that's the path inside the framer prototype. So the prototype is actually just a folder. There's subfolders in it, and import is one folder. You can have multiple things that are imported. For this case, color palette at 2x is a folder that's created by this sketch import process. So everything you'll need is in there. Essentially, Framer just converts your sketch layers into sketch groups into images. So let's go back to that and see, the name has to match. So if you change the path here, it will not work. Let's create a page component. Page equals to new page component. These components are things that Framer actually have built in. So a page component is a component that you can use to swipe. And page is a name that we give to this component, so we can name it anything. We can name it a square, we can name it, special layer. So what's happening right now is that we want the cards to be inside this page component, so we can swipe the page to change the cards from left to right. So how do we do that? Well, we can use the default page component to make it happen by putting the cards inside the component and actually let it do the heavy lifting. Now you'll see that when I drag this view, the line breaks actually, there's no line breaks for the sketch line. So be careful how you treat the line breaks. So in this case, we use tab to make the space go to the right. So each tab is referring to its parent layer. So in this case, we tap once to write properties for the page layer. Tap twice to write properties for page layers, sublayers. So be careful on how many tabs you want to write. So let's go back and just write one, just write properties for the page layer. So width equals to screen. Now, this is a short way of doing this. We can actually put in real numbers, but screen.width is a built-in property that basically lets you take the device screen's width, and have the number automatically be plugged into the width of the page layer we just created. So we can write 752, it's the same width, right? It's the iPhone width. And half the width is 375, right? So that's how that works. So to make it somewhat responsive when you change to another device to preview, it's better to just write screen.width if you know this element is going to be whole width. And there's a auto complete function by tapping tab. So we enter height is screen.height. You'll notice a full screen layer, that's the width and height of the entire screen. That's basically your page component. It's already been created. So that's great. Now, what do we want to do with it? We want to put the cards inside this and make it swipe. So swiping gesture is mostly done by the page component already. We just have to think of ways to do it. So one easy way is to think of ways to put the cards inside this page component. So one easy way is to write sketch.color, color palette. We'll try to match the name with the group artboard group dot. Right, so its sublayers are the 4 layers in there. So we can write a sublayer. So we can write another dot sublayer, or we can simply put in the name of the color. So color 1 will be one of the names. So let's try that. Color 1 dot parent. It's returning me an error on the left. So 8 is highlighted in red. You'll see. So that's because it's not recognizing this input. So theoretically, this command should work, but it's not working. So let's find out why. This is a good point to figure out debugging. So you'll notice that you'll have to debug a lot. So let's write another function to see if it works. We can write print. So print is like console log for the web. So for some of you who used web technology before, so we're just simply writing out the system's input value for this. So this is undefined. That means we cannot find sketch.colorpalette.color1. But can we find color palette? We can. Once we remove the color 1, we notice that on the right corner there is a layer. Now we write sublayers because we want to see what the sublayers are. So in fact, this is returning in the print dialog the actual layers of. So layer 2 is color 1. So the ID is 2. The name is 1. So that's the layer we want. But once we change the name to actual layer 2 or color 1, it doesn't work. Well, this is because it's a quirk of Framer. You essentially have to write the root level import layer. So sketch.color1 is, you have to skip the color palette. You just go directly to color 1. So sketch.color1 will be what you're trying to go for. Now we have that. We can simply, so notice how the sketch is created by the system. You can actually change that too. So now we are able to select the sketch.color1, the layer. We can put it inside the page. This should theoretically work, but it's not working for some reason. It's not being put into this container. Why is that? Well, that's because page layer is different from page's content. We want to put the content inside the put it inside the content of the page layer. This is just the syntax of Framer. You can't just put directly inside a component. You have to always put things in a component's content. So you just have to remember that. Great. Now we have that. Ooh, see that swipe? We can actually swipe it already. Now this is not the precise swipe we want, but we can see it's already in there. We have some actions available for us to take. So that's how you add a quick gesture in a pre-built layer right away. Let's refresh. Refresh gets rid of the printout dialog box and figure out what to do next. We can copy this and change the name to put each layer inside the swipe. Now we have two layers in there, and it's already swipeable. But this is not an effective way to actually write this. There's 4 layers to be put inside this page component. We don't want to repeat that. What if there's 100 layers, right? So that's a lot of redundancy. So we can write a for loop. For loop is a function. So in this case, for loop is iterating through layer, which is a arbitrary layer we are naming, in this sketch.colorPalette list. So we can see the structure in the middle here. It's actually a list of 4 items. So color 4, 3, 2, 1. This is essentially a list of things inside the color palette. So we write Color palette are sublayers. This is the name of the list. It's essentially the sublayers we're going for. Print again with the print layer. So in this case, layer responds to each cycle of thing of the list item inside sublayers. And we notice there's an I on the side besides layers. Well, that's because although a layer is calling for the actual layer inside the list, I is an index. So if you notice the printout, we've added print I to it. Not only do we print the layer still, but we're printing the index number, which is starting at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. We can, of course, remove that. So in this case, we need the index number later, so that's why we have it. But usually we just remove that. Now you'll notice there's an error here. Can't find I, of course. That is because I is no longer inside this for loop. So that when you try to print I, the system's going, where's I? So that's why it's throwing this error. So when we get rid of it, sure enough, the error goes away. So you can see there's no numbers here anymore. Yeah, so what do we do next? We will put the I back in because we do need it, as you'll see soon. And let's see. So we want to get rid of this print layer thing, but we want to put the layers inside the content. So because we don't want to repeat the 4 layers. So we just simply write layer.parent equals to page.content. It's putting inside this container called page.content. So we're adding each layer inside the list under color palette into page.content. So the way it works is that you can simply swipe now because the way we've set it up inside Sketch is already, there's enough spacing. Remember the sketch file is laid out like this already. So when you add it in like this, it's already in place. So as you can see, it's very quick. Under 9 lines of code, we've already been able to, make a basic page swipe thing working. Well, as you can see in the middle here, we used to be on the color palette, is now on the page, right? So that's essentially this loop working. So we're moving the list items from page palette to page.content. Now let's add layer.x equal to 500. So what this does is that this is moving all 4 layers to x equals to 500. So if you hover on the layers, you will see that it's x equals to 500. Now we can still swipe it, but that means we're swiping every single item because they're in the same spot. So we don't want 500. So what do we want? That's a good question. We gotta figure out what we do want. So we want layer.width times I. This is because I is the index number. That goes from 0 to the total number of layers. So when we do that, 0 to 4 generates a nice x position for each layer that's like one next to each other. You start at 0, the next one will be starting at the width of the previous one. There's no gap in between. Well, this is sort of what we want, but not exactly what we want. We want a nice margin in between. So how do we do that? Well, we can let's see. We can tweak the space in between layer.width. Since it's starting at 0, we can simply add an item add an arbitrary margin by eyeballing it. And the way we do it would be bracket layer width plus, let's say, 50. Bracket. See, right away it updates. This is the beauty of Framer. It updates very quickly right away, and you can see that, okay, now there's a margin. This is great because we do want a margin, and since the program starts at 0, so anything times 0 is still at 0, so the first is always at 0 right now. But there is a margin that goes beside every single layer, so that works. But it's not the right thing because we do want the first to be nested in the middle, so we can add a beginning margin to it. So in this case, 120 gives us a nice big centralized, first card and allows us to page through the rest of it with ease. So that 120 is only applied to the first card since it's not in the multiplication. So that works. But it's still swiping up and down, as you can see. So we can add a function called, a built-in property called scroll vertical to tweak that. This is a Boolean, meaning that it's a true and false variable. So if you put it as false, this means you cannot scroll vertically. This is how you read it. You cannot scroll vertically. You can only scroll horizontally in this case because that's already built in. So if you try to do that, it doesn't work. You can still scroll horizontally. That's exactly what we want. So that's great. Let's see what else is there. Let's fix some of this stuff around the actual design. So we can add a shadow to it. A nice shadow would be very beneficial since we're trying to animate this later. So a shadow could bring a lot of clarity once we animate the shadow as well. So let's give it a color. Shadow color is a dark gray. Shadow Y is basically like the distance the shadow is translated by. This is just like writing CSS. 10 equals to 10 pixels. So everything number-wise is actual to pixels. Actually, let's change it to black because black is a better color. Layer shadow blur. This is the same idea as to doing CSS or even Sketch. You will add blur to this. Because this is kind of big actually, so let's change it to something smaller. So 5 pixels of shadow Y is sufficient in my opinion. Great, so we have a very faint subtle shadow. That works. And the swipe is great. The default snapping works. What else do we want to do? We can make an interaction where you click on the card, then card pops up. This is sort of expected since cards are, the affordance of cards is to be tapped and opened. So how do we add such an interaction? Well, the good thing is that we have the loop already built in. So we can just still use the same sort of logic to apply a thing to layer. So we'll start with the layer dot states dot click. So before we even attach any interactions, this is the way we create a new state, a changed thing. So careful about tabbing right now. We're tabbed two tabs to the right. We want tab once because we're addressing the property of layer. So in this case, we want to change scale when it's clicked. And the clicked name is arbitrary. So this is the scale we're going for. It's 1.3, it's around that size. And its shadow blur will be, shadow Y will be a lot, somewhat bigger. And let's give it a crazy shadow blur, something that's huge, that's very visible, to indicate that this in fact has been lifted above ground, closer to us right now. So that gives us like a nice wide shadow blur area. Remember, the clicked here is only a name, it's not the interaction. So we're giving a state called clicked. Now we can add an animation to it, or we can add the events. So why don't we just add the events first and then deal with the animation later. So onClick is a common event. Remember, the arrow is the function syntax for Framer, for CoffeeScript actually. So you write a function and use an arrow to indicate that it is a function. It does something after the arrow. So write whatever you want to write after that for this layer. So the idea is that when you click it, this layer should switch to the next state. So a good habit to talk right now is to actually leave some comments. By using hashtag, we're actually essentially writing things for ourselves later, because when days go by, we come back to this prototype, we might not remember what we did. Some of the logic that we read up upon might be forgotten. So it's always a good habit to leave comments for yourself, or even for possibly other people who's going to be exploring this later. You never know. Yes, so in this case, I can just write this is a state that we've created called clicked. I think that's sufficient enough. for now. But if there are complex things that you don't know, it's entirely up to you how you want to document your code. Now everything is still nested inside this for loop. This is the key thing to remember, is that everything's still nested in the for loop, and spacing is really important. We can now add an animation to it. The way this works is that you have to write layer.states.animation. This is just how the syntax works. I don't know why you can't put it in line like the other properties right under by using a tab under layer, but that's just the way it works. Maybe this works now, maybe they've changed the syntax, but the way I learned it is that you can only do it outside like this with another line. So use equals curve. We're setting a curve, like the spring curve would be a good example. So we simply write a string for it, which is a thing inside quotes, a line of text telling this function that we want to pass in a string of 200 force, 1800 friction, and 0 velocity, because the force and friction are creating enough speed already. So that's a common pattern we use. Now we have this. The tricky part is to pass that state we just created, that scale up interaction, to this actual layer. So inside this onClick event, we want each layer states to move to the next one. So as we click on, only the last one moved. So we clicked a few, only the last one moved. Why is that? So we click on the third one, only the last one jumped up. It's a nice interaction. It's pretty close to what we want. It feels great to tap that last card, but there's a nice shadow to this. It's actually quite nice, but it's not doing the things right. Why doesn't it work for the previous three? Well, this is because this is still a loop, remember? So we're talking about the same layer, abstract layer, that's used in every single card. So even though the clicked state is added to every single card, it's not being called. So each card has the clicked state, but when we're doing layer.onClick, this loop is still looping through all the layers, but it's not understanding that this specific layer is referring to the layer before it. It still thinks that this layer is the parent layer. So it has no distinction between the three layers. When we do want, in fact, this last layer to be distinct from the other 3-4 color layers, the color cards. Yeah, so how do we deal with that? I think a good way is to remember that you're talking about the layer you just clicked. So we write at. This is a sort of a syntax thing for CoffeeScript. So this just means that whenever this layer is clicked, at denotes the action to be only on that layer. So the self is being the one that's changing. So, you see there? I just tried to click it and it works. Every single one works, but there's a weird thing here where it's like it's going under the one that's like after it. This makes sense because each card is nested, like it's below the next card. So we want to bring this to the front. Well, you write add again. It's the same card. Add.bring to front. This is a function that's built within Framer. What this does is that it brings it to the front. There we go. Whenever I click it, this layer becomes the top layer inside of this list, and it goes to the top, and we can easily see the interaction now in its full glory, and it's precisely what we set out to create. So that's very good. And the pagination works. Let's see. Everything seems to be working, and we only wrote how many? 26 lines of code, and spent less than half an hour writing this, and it's working great. The more you practice, the faster you're gonna get at writing these kind of interactions. And you can even copy this code out or build a module, but that's more complex down the road. But you can copy it out and see it working. You can reuse it. Now, why don't we change something here? Let's see. We can add our own changes to the sketch file and have it import. Oh, why is it 0? Anyway, let's just quickly design the fly here. So once we import this change file in there, it's going to be auto updated, like not auto updated, but like updated right away. So let's try to create a sun here, just to see, like, why not? Like, why can't we update it? And let's see, this is probably going to be a sunset, so it's going to be red sky, it's going to be dark purplish ocean underneath. So let's get rid of the border here. Let's create a gradient. In this case, no, this is already built there. Perfect. We can do it like this. Doesn't really work. We can do it like this. This is probably better. Probably better. Yeah, it's close enough. So let's save this file. And as you can see right now, these two are in here. So let's drag it into color 4 so it's actually inside the proper group. Remember, group has to be working to have it properly built. So let's re-import this after you save it. Everything's automatic. Just simply hit import. You swipe to the last one. Voila, it's there already. So you can play around. Feel free to try different designs and import it again. See it change. Feel free to add more interactions. Go to the docs button, yeah, there. And here you can sort of search for different interactions you can add. For example, if you want to do a rotate, you can search for rotate. What it does is that it just pulls in all the things with rotate on it. You can keep on searching. So this is a string. It's not really what you want. You don't really get it. Events, you're kind of not detecting events really. So let's go to the side, left side, and look at things we want. So events are things like tap, touch. Doesn't really apply here. We just want to add another thing that changes the rotation actually when you click on it. So that would probably be layers, right? So this layers is dealing with layer changes. Min, max, rotation. There we go. Here's rotation. So yes, so you can refer to this section and actually change the rotation. It would update, and you could put inside states, and it's automatically animating it because of the animation option we put. So state rotation X changes that way. It's almost like a horizontal rotation. So yeah, I have a read through this, and that's it. Alright, so after that demo, we should have a better idea of what Framer is and how to actually apply it to our workflow. Now to wrap up, I'd like to explain how to move forward and what to expect. Where to go next? Quite simply, just to keep on learning. Right? There is a learning curve, but spending about 8 hours and it will get you into the thick of things. You will get the sense that actually, you know what, I'm starting to get this. First couple hours it will be somewhat difficult. Like, it will be fun. Trust me, it will be a very fun process. But then you'll get into points where you will have to look up a lot of things. But the more you do it, the more better it gets. So after you invest, let's say 30 hours in it, you will feel fairly comfortable in your ability with Framer. So that, at least that's for a lot of people's experiences. So don't worry, just keep on learning. That's what I can teach you. If you learn anything from this tutorial, is to just be patient and be playful, and don't stop and don't give up, because you'll get there. I guarantee you. Now the gold mine here is to visit framer.com. Framer.com has a lot of examples. The beauty of it is that every single prototype is shared, and every single prototype has the ability to be opened by Framer without much difficulty. You just click on open example, and the code is right there. So you see how people build their prototypes. This is by far the fastest way to learn, so I couldn't recommend the examples enough. The second thing is to look at the docs. As we've shown in the tutorial video, it's about just looking at the docs and trying to understand it. Using the examples on the side will help, but reading docs is very useful as well. Another thing is articles. When you want to build a specific interaction or use case or look up a flow of doing things, chances are somebody wrote an article for you. So the framer.com section of articles that covers a lot of it, but simply a Google search would return more results as well. So keep on looking for articles people write, and it's very helpful to just keep on reading those things periodically. framer.com also have a great Medium blog. New features and the way it works is frequently talked about, and it's a very good way to stay in the loop of things. So I would recommend you check that out as well. Of course, there's Facebook group, and Uber folks is actually a lot there's a lot of Framer folks at Uber. So definitely rely on us. Talk to me. I'm always here to help. But if I'm not around, leave me a comment or simply go on the Facebook group. It's actually surprisingly sometimes how quickly you can get an answer. I've seen people get answers within 15 minutes. So usually about a couple hours. The longest is about a day. But usually it's around a couple hours people will respond. It's a really active community that has a very good atmosphere. So people are always trying to share code and trying to learn things, ask questions. So that's very helpful. And that's it. That's all the things you need to get started with Framer. So yeah, thanks for listening, and go ahead and keep on building, and happy designing.